Joining us now for World Brief and news stories around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
How are you? Good morning, Dr. Vin. Good morning, I'm fine, thank you. Good morning, Ayo. And good morning, Rufai.
Why did you call her Adefemi?
Hey.
That's how I met her.
Yeah.
It's you and us, Femi.
You guys call me Femi. Yeah. And you know, I don't have a preference, but I love to be called Adefemi because it's pronounced properly. Okay. I really love it. I do. When you grow up in a different country, do you know, I've had so many different variations. It got to a point where I got so used to people mispronouncing my name that it didn't
introduce yourself like that as well.
But being in Nigeria and hearing Kirkley.
I have to call you Femi.
Always. Thank you.
How is mommy?
She's fine, thank you.
Good.
Hopefully we'll be seeing her in Nigeria soon, so that should be great.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. All right, let me tell you about what's happening around the world. We begin in Heathrow, which is the UK's busiest airport and indeed one of the busiest airports in the world. Essentially, they have closed their doors all day today, Friday being the 21st of March, following an outbreak. Well, there's been a power outage at the airport, and that is largely due to a nearby fire in Hayes. Now, these areas are just outside of London, but Heathrow is the flagship airport, and as you can see, that blaze is still ongoing. It started in the early hours of this morning, and as a result of that, there's been a power outage at Heathrow Airport, which means that many flights have been diverted. Flights that were already in the air had to land in different areas. You had a flight coming from Australia that's supposed to land in London that had to be diverted to Paris, and some flights had to return to their original destination, just to show you the chaos on display in the United Kingdom. So we're keeping our eyes across that issue. And then staying kind of in the United Kingdom, but branching a Nigerian story, the suspended senator, Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, has been on a global press tour since her suspension. She's spoken at the United Nations, as we know, following that bombshell interview she left at Arise News on the 28th of February. She's spoken at the United Nations talking about her suspension, and also spoken to British media, including Sky News. She sat down with Anna Botting and disclosed her experiences following the suspension from the Senate. Take a listen to what Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan had to say.
See, I have seen in that chambers where men fight, where senators throw items at each other, curse each other, shout at each other, but they were not suspended. Why? Because they are men? There's this culture of silence, harassment, and fear, intimidation that is intertwined with our culture, whereby a woman is supposed to sit pretty, to be seen only and not heard. I experienced sexual harassment over the past 1 year in the hands of the Senate President.
There's always very, very interesting conversations taking place, and again, just showcasing the gravity of this story. Let's move on now to the United States, where US President Donald Trump has ordered his Education Secretary, Linda McMahon, essentially to start the process of repealing the Department of Education. Now, he has done this, as you can see, flanked by young children, and he has essentially signed an executive order to start dismantling the Department of Education. Now, in order to fully abolish the department, congressional approval will be needed. And though Republicans do control the Senate, it is expected there will be some pushback from Democrats. But really, we should get into the reasons for this move. Now, Trump says the department's budget has more than doubled in size, but national test scores have not improved. He also says that this is him delivering on his campaign promise to take education policy from the federal level to the state level. However, if you're already privy to the workings and machinations of education policy in the United States, you know that states already handle 90% of educational policy anyway. So this is really an unnecessary move, his critics say, for this issue. The move to dismantle the Department of Education has been going on for decades, and essentially Donald Trump has seen it fit to make this move. I mean, the issue here is that the repealing of or the closing down of the Department of Education could have lasting issues on certain students from diverse backgrounds, students of color, students who are disadvantaged financially, LGBTQ students. There's a lot of issues going on. Let's take a listen to what Donald Trump had to say about it.
For them, but everybody knows it's right, and we have to get our children educated. We're not doing well with the world of education in this country, and we haven't for a long time. And we're pleased to be joined today by the woman who I chose because she's an extraordinary person, and hopefully she will be our last Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. Linda.
As you heard him say, he's hoping that Linda McMahon will be the last Secretary of Education, and he hopes that he will be able to secure the approval to finally abolish the Department of Education. Okay, well, moving on now to our last story in the World Brief this morning. And as we can see, the intensifying of bombardment in Gaza has led to a house being broken down, completely obliterated, and everyone inside killed, bar a 1-month-old baby girl. She was rescued from the rubble and she lost her parents. 16 other people were killed in the airstrike that collapsed her home. But she, in what is a miracle, the thinnest of silver linings, was able to emerge from that rubble still alive. What kind of life she would lead with no members of her family surviving is, questionable at this point, but I can imagine that, especially during this period of Ramadan, this is a miracle that in such violence and destruction, such a fragile life could be spared and saved in this way. So those are our stories from the World Brief this morning. I'll take your very brief comments on a story, and then we'll move on to the newspapers.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. That's my reaction to that baby story. Allahu Akbar. I want to quickly move on to Trump. Sure. All of this Trump is doing is because he needs money for the tax cuts for the rich. So he wants to make cuts, but he doesn't know where to make cuts. USAID and all of that. The main place he can make a big cut is that Social Security money. But he also knows people in his base are also there. So he's very careful and he's very cautious, but he doesn't know how to go about it. And that's why all these fringe cuts. And it's also used to attack people on the opposing fold. But if he has to take it to the parliament, a lot of division is also going on among the Democrats. You can see the fight between Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. Some people feel the Democratic Party should be hard enough in tackling Trump. The likes of Schumer are saying, let's be sensible about it. But a lot of people don't want that. That's why the Democratic Party is an all-time low. They are losing a lot of, supporters and voters. Over 300,000 registered voters are pulling out of the Democratic Party. As regards Natasha's story, all we've always called, she has a right to do an international appeal in her case. Everybody does it. If some people feel discouraged, they too should go and do theirs. Some people too are making efforts to recall her here, and you say she shouldn't talk internationally. They tried the kangaroo recall the other day, that didn't work, that INEC called them out. All I am just saying is, please, let us have a fair ground for the investigation of this allegation so that we know who is right or wrong. I'm not saying Akpabio is wrong. I'm not saying Natasha is right. I'm just saying let there be a fair ground for investigation into the matter. Anyway, there are a lot of cases in court as regards the suspension and all of that. There are still many cases adjourned in court. So we also need to be careful because matters are sub judice now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let me take an excerpt from her interview, and I think this is important in the ongoing, and I'm glad that you brought this up so that we don't sweep you under the carpet. I experienced sexual harassment by the past year in the hands of the Senate President, and this sexual harassment, because I refused to yield to his demands, turned into malice whereby my rights and privileges as a senator were deprived. I bring this up because I recall that we had a guest, I've heard a number of people who had said that, it didn't happen within the chamber, so it's not part of it. If what happened outside the chambers is affecting her abilities or is depriving her from her rights and privileges as a senator because she refused something, then it's a big deal. And that's why we're asking for an investigation, because also, if this is seen to be predominant in the Senate, for instance, where she says there's a culture of silence, then we need to investigate so we can stop that culture of silence. And I think it's quite sad that she has to go to international media for her voice to be heard. And thankfully, Arise is probably the only media that's given her, and maybe one other radio station, that platform to really express herself without prejudice, and also giving an opportunity to the accused to also come on board to defend himself. He hasn't come yet, but others have come in his stead to come and speak. So what we're asking for and what we're pushing for is fairness, justice, equity, and to strengthen our institutions here in Nigeria. For the London Heathrow Airport, it's going to be very disruptive. All flights today going to the London Heathrow have been diverted, and some as far as Ireland, Paris, so a lot of people would have to reschedule their appointments. I can't even imagine what level of disruption that would be today.
Okay, two things about the Heathrow Airport, which has now been shut down to 23.59 hours on 21st March. So 1 minute to midnight, it will be reopened today. The authorities have promised. and they have apologized for the disruption. But the two things that I talked about, one, the loss in terms of business. 1,357 flights will be disrupted. About 145,000 passengers will not be able to travel. They've been advised not to make the effort because they have an issue. The second thing is the fire incident at a substation in Hayes, leading to this, electricity problem. Each time Nigerians travel abroad, they say, this light has not gone off. It's only in Nigeria that light is going off. 163,000 homes, in that part of West London, West London part of England, are now in darkness because a transformer, let's use the Nigerian word, had the issues. Yes. But that's the humorous part of it. Now, specifically, to speak about the other subjects, the education department was created by Jimmy Carter. Now it was opposed by Ronald Reagan. In other words, the conservatives, the Republicans, have always opposed the Ministry of Education at the federal government level. Now in the US, that ministry takes less than 2% of federal budget, and it caters in terms of loans to underprivileged persons. Yes. And there's been an assault by this president, typically of Republicans, in the last 40 years, more than 40 years, against anything that would benefit people that fall under DEI, diversity, equality, and inclusion category. So Trump is consistent in attacking minorities. However, to remove a federal department, you need Congress approval. What he has tried to do is to dismantle it, telling Linda McMahon that, you'll be the last education ministry, but there will be litigation. Definitely. And Congress, how will they pass through Congress? Senate has 53 Republicans, 47 Democrats. To upturn the Constitution, a constitutionally created department, you will need 60 votes. Will President Trump get 60 votes? He can at best dismantle. 2,100 members of the education department will be going on compulsory leave today. But will they pass Congress? I don't think so. We'll have to see. Maybe it will happen. Thank
you. Thank you so much for all your thoughts. Let's move on to the newspapers. As ever, we begin with the front page of This Day this morning. And This Day leads with the National Assembly ratifying President Tinubu's state of emergency declaration over Rivers State. You also have the now suspended Rivers State Governor Sim Fubara denying any involvement in these attacks on pipelines that we've been seeing across the region. Now, both the New Telegraph and the Punch, as does the Daily Sun and the Daily Independent, they all, of course, focus on this issue within Rivers State as Fubara blames Wike, and South governors have voiced out their opposition to what President Tinubu has done. Now, The Guardian leads with their write-up on thrones for hire, talking about how traditional rulers and their institutions are becoming more and more politicized, as ever, a very interesting read. And the Daily Trust now leads with Atiku announcing a coalition against President Tinubu. You also have Bayo Ononuga responding to him, saying that essentially the president cannot be distracted by sore losers. Those were his words. Moving on to African papers, the Daily Graphic of Ghana leads with environmental activists calling on President Mahama to reconsider his plan not to burn excavator machines used to mine illegally. The activists say the decision just to confiscate the excavators will not be enough of a deterrent. And then to UK papers, The Mirror, very interestingly, leads with the face of David Norris. Now, David Norris has admitted he was involved in the 1993 murder of then 18-year-old Stephen Lawrence. This is a crime that people in the United Kingdom and indeed around the world would have heard of. Everyone, it feels like everyone knows about this murder, everyone knows about this case. Now, it was a notorious case in the United Kingdom in the early 90s, and indeed, for years and years after that. And it was definitely the catalyst for huge race riots that we saw in London, and the eventual finding of the Metropolitan Police being tagged as being institutionally racist. Now, up to 6 people were involved in Lawrence's stabbing, but it was only 19 years later that 2 people were eventually jailed for the crime. David Norris, who you see there, is one of the 2 people who were jailed back in 2012. And after serving his minimum sentence, he is now eligible for parole. That is why he is saying that, yes, I admit that I was involved, I was there at the scene, but I didn't carry the knife that was used to stab Stephen. So what he's saying is that I would like to be released on parole, and if you're looking for some form of remorse, I can admit that I was there, but not that I killed him. We'll have to see whether or not the board decides that. And then staying with crime in the United Kingdom, the Metro leads with the Metropolitan Police efforts to prosecute the 100 most dangerous predators who target women and girls. Those are your papers from around the world.
Thank you so much, especially for that Stephen Lawrence update. It's very important, very sad. 32 years. He's now remorseful. Okay, let's see how this
They
goes.
say you will now pay council tax.
They've said I had to leave that one alone because it's very controversial. That's what they said, 5% council tax, as if they aren't already taking a lot of council tax from people. What are they going to do with the money?
Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.